You think your problem is the lack of a perfect strategy. You read the right books. You allocate your portfolio rationally. But in the exact millisecond, the global market bleeds and the numbers on your screen start to plummet. Your rationality disappears. You lose sleep. And in the end, you make stupid financial decisions out of pure survival instinct. Let me shatter an illusion for you today. Having a high IQ and a diploma on the wall saves absolutely no one from panic. When your biological instinct kicks in, your logical intelligence simply shuts down. It's not your fault. Your brain was literally programmed by thousands of years of evolution to keep you poor, just so you can feel safe in the short term. While the hysterical masses flee the fire, the old dynasties see panic as a simple tactical buy signal. They don't feel fear because they use a millennia-old rule of neurological control known as Yishuv Hada'at, the settled mind. Today, I am not going to teach you financial math. Math is useless if your hand is shaking when it's time to act. Today, I am going to teach you how to shut down your nervous system. Because if you don't tame your biology, the market will eat you alive. Imagine the following scenario. You are looking at your phone screen. The clock reads 3 in the afternoon. The stock market has just opened up an abyss. A global news story just broke. Something about interest rates or wars. Red aggressively takes over your portfolio. Minus 10%, minus 20%, and it keeps falling. What happens in your body in that exact millisecond, I will tell you, because the answer isn't financial, it's purely biological. Your breathing becomes short and shallow. Your heart rate suddenly spikes, frantically trying to pump more oxygen and blood to your limbs. Your pupils dilate. A cold, acidic, and almost imperceptible sweat begins to form on the palms of your hands. You are not just seeing numbers plummeting on a glass screen. Your body is reacting exactly the way a prehistoric man's body would react upon coming face to face with a hungry predator on the savannah. This is the big dirty secret the suits on Wall Street will never tell you. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a financial collapse on your banking app and a saber-toothed tiger about to devour your family. To your brain's amygdala, the pain of losing your money and the threat of physical death trigger the exact same emergency alarm. And this is exactly where the biology of poverty kicks in. Human evolution took hundreds of thousands of years to refine a perfect survival system. Fear was the exact tool that kept your ancestors alive. When mortal danger appears, the biological rule is clear, absolute, and non-negotiable. Run, flee, seek immediate shelter. Save your skin now and think later. In the jungle, this ruthless rule guarantees the continuation of your bloodline. But in the global financial market, in the ecosystem of modern money, this exact same rule guarantees your absolute ruin. When the market bleeds, your primitive brain screams at you to seek shelter. And what is the financial shelter for a panicking mind? To sell. Sell everything. Realize the loss just so the pain of uncertainty stops torturing your mind. Your brain convinces you through pure anxiety that taking a massive loss today is better than the excruciating agony of not knowing what will happen tomorrow. It sells you poverty in exchange for false emotional relief. You press the sell button. For a few minutes, your heart slows down. The sweat dries. You take a deep breath and tell yourself, "At least I saved what was left." Your brain rewards you with dopamine, for having survived the threat. But you didn't survive. You were just slaughtered and devoured by the financial elite. While you fled in despair, blindly obeying an animal instinct, old money and the men who truly control the game were on the other side of the screen, waiting with surgical patience. They are not afraid of blood in the streets. They feed on it. They bought your assets for a fraction of their real price simply because you couldn't bear the biological pain of uncertainty. Pay close attention. You didn't lose money because your thesis was wrong. You lost because you are human, because you have a nervous system designed for the jungle, trying to operate in a global chess game that does not forgive emotional weaknesses. Poverty is not a matter of math. It is a matter of biology. It is the direct result of a fragile neurological system. If you do not isolate your mind from your body, you will forever be natural prey in this ecosystem. To break this evolutionary curse, you need to stop acting like a scared mammal. You need a protocol, an invisible yet insurmountable barrier between the cruel facts of the world and your fragile feelings. How do you escape your own biology? How do you stop your animal instinct from destroying the wealth you took years, perhaps decades, to build? The answer is not in a new finance course. The answer is not in a Wall Street chart indicator. The answer is thousands of years old. The oldest and wealthiest dynasties in human history do not survive empires, wars, and economic collapses by pure luck. They don't survive because they have a crystal ball. They survive because they master a brutal, millennia-old principle of neurological control. In Jewish wisdom, there is a profound concept called Yishuv Hada'at, which can be translated to the West as the settled mind, or absolute equanimity. Yishuv Hada'at is the rare ability to keep the mind cold, calculating, and unshakable, while the entire world around you is on fire. For old money, the global market is not a casino, it is a chessboard. And the non-negotiable rule of this board is a surgical separation between your identity as a man and the numbers flashing on the screen. The great mistake of the common man, the real reason why he panics and loses everything, is because he ties his own ego to his bank balance. If his portfolio goes up on Monday, he feels like a genius, an untouchable king. Arrogance blinds his judgment. But if the portfolio plummets on Tuesday, he feels like an absolute failure. He falls into deep despair. The volatility of the market begins to dictate the volatility of his soul. This is the exact recipe for ruin. When your personal value is tied to a fluctuating chart, you are not an investor. You are an emotional hostage. The settled mind protocol demands that you untie your ego from your capital. Pay close attention now. Money is not you. Money is just a tool. It is a soldier you send to the battlefield. In any real war, some soldiers will die. Some positions in your portfolio will bleed. This is not the end of the world. This is simply part of the math of conflict. If you cry over every piece lost on the board, you do not have the stomach required to be the general. The old families teach their heirs from a very early age to look at capital with a purely clinical coldness. They train the mind to see a 40% drop, not as a sleep-depriving tragedy, but as a mere statistical data point. It is just pure information. No emotional baggage, no cold sweat, no night panic. When you finally achieve the state of Yishuv Hada'at, biological anxiety completely loses its power over you. You begin to observe the external chaos with a calculated and superior distance. The hysterical television news becomes just irrelevant background noise. The despair of amateurs on social media becomes merely a technical indicator that the masses are acting like prey. You build a lead vault around your mind. The market can plummet. People can scream and run for the emergency exits. But inside this neurological vault, there is only absolute silence and relentless logic. But knowing that the settled mind exists is just your first intellectual step. The big question is, how do you apply this coldness tactically in the middle of the hurricane? How does the true elite behave in the first 24 hours of a widespread financial collapse? How does the true elite behave in the first 24 hours of a widespread financial collapse? They don't walk into meeting rooms screaming. They don't lose sleep. They apply what we call behind the scenes of old money, the dead man strategy. Pay close attention. When blood starts flowing through the financial streets, the worst thing you can do is try to be proactive, driven by pure emotion. The common man, when the market plummets, immediately turns into a reverse dopamine addict, consuming his own tragedy. He opens his brokerage app every 10 minutes just to watch his balance shrink. He turns on the television to the news channels, absorbing every word from hysterical analysts who profit by selling the end of the world. He joins messaging groups where other losers are sharing their own panic and validating their own cowardice. This is absolute mental suicide. You are voluntarily injecting poison into your own nervous system. The dead man strategy is the exact opposite of this. It is the absolute power of non-doing. It is calculated and predatory inertia. In the exact millisecond, a global crisis breaks out and your portfolio melts by 20%. The first mechanical rule of the silent elite kicks in. You play dead to the noise of the outside world. This means, literally and practically, deleting your bank or brokerage app from your phone. You don't look at your balance. You don't check the bleeding charts. You turn off the television. You summarily silence all financial notifications. And if any friend or relative comes to talk to you about the impending collapse, you simply change the subject with the brutal coldness of someone who already knew this was going to happen. Why is this so lethally effective? Because you are removing the oxygen from your own biological fear. Panic needs new visual and auditory stimuli every instant to stay alive in your cerebral cortex. If you cut off the source of toxic information, biological anxiety simply starves to death in a matter of hours. The dead man does not react. The dead man does not sweat. The dead man does not make rash moves. The dead man never sells solid assets at the rock bottom, simply because a journalist in a suit said the economy is going to collapse. At this level of the game, you replace the emotion of the moment with purely mechanical rules. Rules that were defined months or years earlier when your mind was perfectly calm. If the market drops 30%, the rule isn't to feel fear. The rule is to trigger a buy order that was already set. Full stop. There is no internal debate. There is no hesitation. There is no room to listen to your own heart beating faster. By adopting the dead man strategy, you definitively shield your decision-making. You remove yourself from the herd of frightened mammals that are blindly running toward the abyss. You become a calm ghost in the midst of the hysterical crowd. And it is exactly in this state of voluntary paralysis and cognitive isolation that your competitive advantage is born. The storm passes and you are still standing. But understand one thing. It's not enough to just survive the collapse by doing nothing. Playing dead only serves to protect the capital you already have. The true and brutal transfer of historical wealth does not happen on defense. It happens on offense. And this is where the game gets really dangerous. How do you train your mind to transform the despair and panic of the rest of the world into your biggest buy trigger? Merely surviving a financial collapse is not enough. Playing dead, as I taught in the previous protocol, only serves to shield the capital you already possess. Defense prevents your ruin, but it is the attack at the exact right moment and with a cold mind that builds dynasties. The true transfer of wealth in human history does not happen when the charts are green and everyone is happy. Wealth changes hands in the exact millisecond that financial blood flows through the streets. The great secret of old money families is not just feeling no fear of the crisis. The hidden secret is that they have hacked their own nervous system. They have managed to transform the irrational despair of the rest of the world into the greatest buying trigger that exists. Think like a predator. In the savannah, when the herd panics and starts running aimlessly, the lion isn't frightened by the dust kicked up. The panic of the herd is the biological signal that the prey is blind and dinner is served. In the global financial market, the structural logic is rigorously the same. Your goal, starting today, is to train your brain to invert the danger signal. When you see assets plummeting 30% in a week, when you hear your neighbor crying because he lost his life savings, when the news anchors are pale, announcing the economic apocalypse, your trained brain will not release cortisol. It will release dopamine. You will learn to feel a silent, cold, and calculating pleasure in the despair of the masses. Because their panic is not the end of the world. Their panic is, in fact, an irrational liquidation of the best assets on the planet. They are literally begging to hand over their wealth to you for a laughable fraction of the original price, just to rid themselves of the psychological pain of uncertainty. It is in this exact scenario of global hysteria that you leave the paralyzed state of the dead man and enter the state of lethal execution. This is where practical knowledge separates the boys from the generals. This is where you activate, silently and mercilessly, your third of capital, that tactical reserve, the heavy ammunition you patiently kept in the shadows for months or years, while everyone around you spent everything in euphoria. You are not going to buy because you think the market will recover tomorrow. You are not going to buy guided by hope. You are going to buy because the immutable math of human nature dictates that hysteria creates prices that make no logical sense. You simply walk across the battlefield, over the financial wreckage of those who gave in to fear, and collect the wealth they abandoned as they fled. Understand a brutal truth that moralists and the weak hate to admit. A market collapse is not a tragedy. It is simply the oldest and most non-negotiable wealth transfer mechanism on earth. Money obeys physical laws. It always, without exception, leaves the trembling hands of the impulsive and frightened and flows like water into the firm hands of the prepared. The financial market is not a living entity that conspires against you. It is not a monster hiding in the shadows, waiting to devour your savings. It has no feelings. It doesn't know your name, and honestly, it doesn't care about your sleepless nights or your cold sweat. The market is, in its purest essence, merely a relentless mirror of human nature. And the iron rule governing this mirror, the silent math that has transferred power from one generation to the next for millennia, is extremely simple and painful to accept. Money will always flee the hands of those who cannot control their own emotions, and it will run like a river seeking the ocean into the pockets of those who operate with machine-like discipline. Wealth is, and always has been, a mere transfer of capital from the impatient and frightened man to the cold and patient man. You spent your whole life believing that the secret of the old dynasties was a hidden mathematical formula or access to privileged information discussed behind closed doors. But the brutal truth we dissected here today is that the biggest obstacle between you and true wealth retention is inside your own skull. It is your biology. It is your animal instinct begging for immediate safety in a game that exclusively rewards calculating discomfort and long-term vision. Starting today, your training changes. You will no longer behave like prey in the savannah. You will shield your nervous system and implement the settled mind protocol. You will separate, with the precision of a combat surgeon, your identity as a man from the numbers flashing red on your screen. Your bank balance does not define your honor and does not dictate your state of mind. When chaos breaks out, and it always breaks out, you will use the dead man's strategy. You will cut off the oxygen to your own fear. And then, at the exact moment that blood flows through the financial streets and the masses are liquidating the best assets on the planet for crumbs, you will act without hesitation, without panic. Just the mechanical execution of a rule defined in silence. This is the dividing line. This is what separates the men who build lasting empires from the boys who give everything back at the first sign of a storm. I don't teach miracles. I teach the math, the human nature, and the unbreakable discipline behind the oldest money on earth. If you understood the gravity of what I revealed today and are willing to forge your mind in ice and iron, subscribe to this channel. Leave a like on this video to prove to the algorithm and to yourself that you are not part of the frightened herd. And to solidify this commitment that your biology will no longer dictate your destiny, go down to the comments below and type just one word. Write the word control. That will be our silent pact. Your training is just beginning.